All right, fantasy football waiver wire time. It is officially now the playoffs if your league is not gigantic. Either way, it's either the start of the playoffs or the continuation of the playoffs, and waiver wire is very important. So those in the live chat, with the exception, of course, of Toxic, because I'm playing him this week, and so Toxic, just pick up your Raiders. That's all. That's all I'm gonna say. Like Aiden O'Connell, lock that one in. Ignore the fact that he left the field. Yeah. Actually, I do have a Raider in here, so I can't go too hard on that joke, but make sure you lock in those Vegas Raiders for the next couple of weeks. This one's going to feel like I'm kind of trolling a little bit, but I actually think Bryce Young has been playing pretty well. And so at the quarterback spot, he is, I think, the main streaming option that you can roll with this week. He's 6% rostered. He's playing better. He is playing better football, and that's why I think he is someone that you can go out and feel comfortable with. They're facing the Cowboys this week, and we just saw like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all them had a pretty good week. Now, I'm not anticipating 40 points being put up by any of the guys on the Panthers, but I do think that you can feel pretty confident rolling out there with your Carolina Panthers this week. And then also, after the Cowboys matchup, they get Arizona and they get Tampa Bay. So the rest of the fantasy playoffs kind of feels like you can trust Bryce Young. He could be someone that you really do feel comfortable with going into, like I said, these fantasy playoff matchups. And our number one wide receiver is actually on his team. We're doing the stack. We're looking at Xavier Legette, 28% rostered, 6+ targets in each of the last 3 weeks. 8 targets last week, only 2 receptions, but I do think he'll bounce back. And again, that schedule that Bryce Young is playing in the fantasy playoffs, Xavier Legette gets that as well, right? So that is where I think that, again, maybe a bit of a deeper league-ish. I don't think that we're going to be rocking with him Toxic in the Vampire League, but I do think that this is going to be someone that can help out in those 12, even 14-team leagues, and someone who can really put up a couple of good points there. Also a wide receiver that we can pick up. 16% rostered. It's Joshua Palmer, with the LA Chargers. I know. He drops the football a lot, but 8+ targets in 2 of the last 3 weeks. It's a great matchup against Tampa Bay. You can we have said this all season long. You can throw on the Bucks. And so I think Joshua Palmer is going to have a few opportunities where he is going to be able to push the ball down the field and be able to put up some, again, big fantasy points. You hope that the trust is still there, although again, this week it was 8 targets, so you feel pretty good about that. I think Joshua Palmer is someone, again, this one is probably a bit more for the 14 to 16 teamers, but I think even in 12 teamers, even with no more bye weeks, but injuries happen and stuff like that. So I think Josh Palmer is someone who is certainly trustworthy, I would say, and at least pick up a bull in fantasy football. And the last one here, this one is certainly for the deeper leagues. This one's for the 16-team folks. But Trey Tucker with the Vegas Raiders, 8% rostered. Targets and opportunities are all over the place for this guy. But he is a real speed factor on this team. And the Raiders actually have a pretty good schedule. So I know I made the joke earlier with Toxic, but the Raiders actually have a pretty good schedule for the fantasy playoffs. They have Atlanta this week, Jacksonville next week, and then New Orleans to close out the fantasy playoffs. I think he is a good, if you are desperate, option at the wide receiver spot as they look to see what they have going into next year, when they obviously will have a new quarterback and probably a whole lot of new out in Vegas. And I think Trey Tucker could be someone that they look to keep around. At running back, our number one option for the second week in a row is a San Francisco 49er, Patrick Taylor Jr. We all knew we'd be talking about Patrick Taylor Jr., or PTJ, as I've obviously long time called him. 6% rostered. It's next man up in San Francisco. Isaac Guerrero gets banged up last week at the end of the 49ers game against the Chicago Bears, and San Francisco plays 2 days from now. They have the Thursday night game. I'm pretty sure it's against Seattle. Probably should have looked that up. Either way, big game. And again, the same stuff applies from Guerrero over now to PTJ, that he is someone that is going to get probably a lot of opportunities given San Francisco's offense and how they run things. They had a really good week here against the Chicago Bears. I'm not anticipating 38 points being scored again, but I think Patrick Taylor Jr. is someone that you can trust. Another one And I was very surprised to see him available. But Jaleel McLaughlin at 13% rostered for the Denver Broncos, 16 opportunities in their game before the bye. He looks like the hottest hand out in out in Denver right now. It was coming off of a game against Cleveland. It's a three-headed situation out there right now with Javonte, with McLaughlin, and with Estime. And it really does just kind of seem like it's riding the hot hand. McLaughlin was clearly the best running back for Denver in that last game. So I think he's going to get the opportunity to prove that he is that again. And it's a decent matchup against the Colts. The rest of the schedule for Denver isn't easy. And so this is more of a 1 week plug and play sort of a situation, and worry about next week. But I think he is fine this week. Again, maybe not the best waiver wire segment if we're bringing up two Raiders, but Sincere McCormick, not that lying McCormick. This one's the sincere one for the Raiders at 16% rostered. Double-digit opportunities in the last two games. It's a tougher matchup against the Falcons, but then after that, the Falcons' run defense is pretty good. But we talked about it a bit before when, again, we talked about way too many Vegas Raiders in the playoffs. But Trey Tucker, they got Jacksonville and New Orleans after that. You can run on those teams. And Sincere McCormick, again, I think is going to get some opportunities. They just, before we started here, put Zamir White on IR. And so I think now McCormick is going to have an opportunity to show what he can do in that Raider backfield. Another one, this one is a little bit more of a let's wait and see. And honestly, if he's available, this might be a bit more of a defensive move, as Isaiah Davis of the New York Jets is 11% rostered, 10 carries and 6 targets this last week. He has touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. The volume is entirely dependent on if Breece Hall is going to be back or not. It's a good matchup against Jacksonville. The Rams, you can run on them, and then you can actually run on the Bills, and that's who the Jets have in Week 17. If the Jets are just going to call it with Breece Hall, Isaiah Davis, I think, is going to be someone who has a lot of value. And again, maybe you picked him up this week and you're rolling with him, but if he is available in your league, this might be I'm going to get this guy so other teams don't when it comes down to the next couple of weeks. And the last one here is Kendre Miller, at 4% rostered, 10 carries and a target this last week. Their season is done. I know they just beat the Giants, but the season's pretty well over for New Orleans, and he could be a part of the future, so I do think that we're going to see a little bit more volume for Miller this week. They have Washington coming up. That's a defense I think you can run on. Green Bay and Las Vegas, it's not the best schedule. It's not the worst schedule either. And so whether it is as a handcuff for Kamara or kind of a bet that New Orleans is going to want to see what they have in this kid, I think either way, it's a pretty good option for you if you are looking for a running back here this week. At the tight end spot, Noah Fant. He is someone who we continue to bring up. Tight end sucks. We all know this. 19% rostered, 4 targets in 4 straight games, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's tight end. It's a good matchup with Green Bay on an offense that's starting to pick up some steam. I think Noah Fant is a very good if you're desperate play. Another one, I was surprised he was only 10% rostered. Juwan Johnson. There isn't a whole lot left out in New Orleans in terms of pass catching options. Now, there isn't a whole lot left for pass throwing options either in New Orleans, but Juwan Johnson is certainly going to be someone who I think gets quite a few looks. With Taysom Hill now out of the lineup for the season, there isn't much in this offense, and so I think Johnson has some pretty good value. And then on the defensive side of things, the Cincinnati Bengals, 34% rostered. They are facing Tennessee, which is a good matchup coming off of a 6-point performance against Jacksonville. Also, Washington, 24% rostered. They are facing the Saints, who, with everyone banged up, may have the worst roster in the league. And then lastly, Atlanta, 10% rostered. Great matchup with the Raiders. And then they get the Giants next week. So this could be a bit of a carryover play, so you just don't have to worry about it for a couple of weeks with a couple of cake matchups for Atlanta. The thing you worry about with the Falcons is they've been giving up quite a few points lately because they're on the field a ton because Kirk Cousins keeps giving the ball to the wrong team. And so you're hoping for pick sixes thrown by Kirk Cousins, not just interceptions that put them in bad positions. So you really hope Kirk Cousins just goes way off the rails and is throwing pick six now instead of interceptions. But against the Raiders, I don't think that's really going to be a concern. You do worry maybe a little bit about the Giants there, but I still think that that is a matchup that you want to take advantage of from a fantasy football standpoint. So those are the kind of breakdown in terms of the, I guess, must adds or the top ones at each position. We're looking at Bryce Young, again, 6% rostered for Carolina. Xavier Legette, also 28% rostered for the Carolina Panthers. I think that's it's not a bad stack when we look at daily fantasy coming up later on in the week. And I think he is someone that you feel pretty comfortable with. Patrick Taylor is the next man up at the running back spot. A few good running back options available this week, but I think he is the one that should be the main priority. At 19% owned at tight end, it is Noah Fant. And then our defense, Washington, 24% rostered. I think that is one that has probably the best matchup, although talking through it on the Atlanta side, it did feel like maybe there was a little bit more there than just in terms of kind of a couple bigger options going down the line. But either way, I think the fantasy football waiver wire this week should be able to help you as we get into the playoffs.